Good evening, everyone. My name is Mary Jo Meissner, and I'm Vice President for Communications and Public Affairs here at the Boston Foundation. It's my pleasure to welcome you here this morning. Thank you very much, or this evening, sorry. You can tell where my head's at, and thank you very much for joining us. I just want to make sure that for those of you, I don't know everybody in the audience, I see a lot of familiar faces, but for those of you who don't know about us, the Boston Foundation is Greater Boston's community foundation. We were founded in 1915, which means that we are approaching our 100th anniversary, and you're going to be hearing more from us about that very soon. We have more than 900 different funds here at the Boston Foundation. We're delighted to have lots of donors who do work with us, and we work closely with them throughout the year. We also do a tremendous amount of discretionary grant making. We make about combined $80 million of grants to the Boston community and throughout the area every year. And we also play the role of a major civic leader for our city and our region and our state. We publish research. We bring people together to discuss important issues, many of which are brought to us by our very well-known Boston Indicators Project. And we help inform and drive public policy on a whole range of strategies that the foundation feels are the things that really are high leverage for our community. So we're honored tonight to have with us all three authors of the book, Do More Than Give, The 6 Practices of Donors Who Change the World. This book, we feel, is a really important contribution to the literature of philanthropy and social change. We also think it's a very important book because our CEO, Paul Grogan, is profiled in it, as well as the work of the Boston Foundation. So you notice a couple of bright lights here in the room, and that's because C-SPAN is actually taping this tonight for use on its BookTV, and we're also live streaming this ourselves. The Boston Foundation is for people who couldn't attend in purpose. So as I mentioned, we are honored to have the authors of Do More Than Give here with us this evening, Leslie Crutchfield, John Kania, and Mark Kramer. All of them are associated with FSG, which was founded in 2000 as the Foundation Strategy Group, which is a consulting firm that specializes in strategy, evaluation, and research. Today, FSG works across all sectors and, frankly, around the globe. I was talking to John tonight and hearing about an effort perhaps to open an office in Mumbai. They're in Geneva. They're partnering with foundations, corporations, nonprofits, governments, and agencies to develop effective solutions to the world's most challenging issues. FSG helps organizations individually and collectively achieve social impact by discovering ways to solve social problems. We like to think at the Boston Foundation that we're doing the same thing. So in many ways over the years we have partnered with FSG, and we're delighted to have that partnership. So tonight we're going to be meeting with these authors and having what I know is going to be a fascinating dialogue. We are proud that Paul Grogan is one of our panelists, and we're delighted to also have with us Blake Jordan from the Highland Street Family Foundation. And I want to also make sure that you know that after the formal part of our evening, we invite you to stay for some more food and drink. We're going to have much more food outside in the reception area. And we also have complimentary copies of the book, Do More Than Give. They'll be available to you in the Roxbury boardroom right afterwards, and our authors will be available to sign the book if you'd like to have that. So with that, I'd like to now introduce one of the authors of the book, Leslie Crutchfield, who will introduce our other speakers as we go along. And Leslie will start with an overview of the tenets of the book, Do More Than Give. Leslie is a senior advisor at FSG, an author, and a leading authority on scaling social innovation and high-impact philanthropy. Her previous book, Forces for Good, The 6 Practices of High-Impact Nonprofits, was named by Economist magazine on its Best Business Books of the Year list. Leslie is a recent managing director of Ashoka and former director of the Ashoka U.S. and Canada Fellowship Program. In the 1990s, She co-founded and published a national magazine for social entrepreneurs and growing nonprofits. Leslie is a frequent media contributor whose work has been featured by CNBC, Financial Times, Fast Company, The Washington Post, The Chronicle of Philanthropy, and the Stanford Social Innovation Review. So with that, I'd like Leslie to come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Jo, for that warm introduction. I'm kind of arranging the microphone here. I'm hoping that folks can hear me in the back. Okay, I see some heads nodding. Good evening. On behalf of my co-authors, John, Mark, and I, we are so delighted to be here at the Boston Foundation and having an opportunity to talk with you about the ideas of catalytic philanthropy that we write about in our new book, Do More Than Give, The 6 Practices of Donors Who Change the World. And it's particularly a special evening for us because my co-authors and I have had the opportunity to travel really all around the U.S. and even overseas with groups of donors and philanthropic leaders, nonprofit leaders such as yourselves, to share the ideas in the book. But this is the first time we've all been together right here in FSG's hometown of Boston. And we got together to write this book because we at FSG have come to believe that the way philanthropy is commonly practiced today has got to change. In the U.S. alone, we give $300 billion through donors to deserving nonprofits, and yet when you look at the progress that philanthropy and nonprofits have made towards trying to solve many of the complex problems we all care so much about, whether it's poverty or struggling school systems, affordable housing and the lack thereof, climate change, you see that we have so far to go in terms of even scratching the surface with some of these problems. So we have these concerning statistics, but we also wrote this book for intensely personal reasons as well. My co-author, Mark Kramer, for instance, he grew up in a family with a small family foundation. And from early on, he could see the good that writing checks to worthy nonprofits could do. But he also got a glimpse of some of the family foundation world and some of the dysfunctions that can exist in family foundations. The seeming lack of ability sometimes to learn from peers, really needing to recreate the wheel. Dissension sometimes among families about where to give their money, how much to give away. So much so that sometimes he saw foundations that couldn't even come to agreement to meet their 5% payout. And that seems absurd given the complexity of problems that are crying out for answers. So that's one of the things that really propelled Mark to go start FSG a decade ago with Harvard Business School professor Michael Porter. Now, it was started as Foundation Strategy Group to help foundations do just that, develop better strategies, more effective approaches to solving social problems. And of course, FSG has grown to much more than that in that time. Now, for John Kania, my other co-author, he came from a different perspective. John had spent more than 2 decades in the private sector. He had risen to become a partner at not 1 but 2 premier strategy consulting firms. And while it was an amazing experience to be able to help these global Fortune 500 companies gain more market share and develop his strategy skills, it wasn't meeting John's deep-held desire to make a meaningful difference in the world. So he left all that to join FSG just a year after it was founded and helped grow the firm to where it is today. And for me, to this book, I bring my own experience, quite different. I've spent my whole career in the nonprofit sector, launching and leading nonprofits for the first decade, and for the second decade, working in philanthropy and writing about trying to find new ways to solve these problems through research and analysis. And the 6 practices of donors who change the world that we write about in Do More Than Give really were inspired by the 6 practices originally revealed in Forces for Good, my first book. And one of the most frequent questions I would get as I was out speaking with audiences much like this about Forces for Good, well, how can donors apply these practices? And Mark had just published 2 years ago a seminal article called Catalytic Philanthropy, and this inspired us to join together and say, how can we find examples of foundations, donors, whether they're corporate foundations, community foundations like the Boston Foundation, private family foundations, or